BJ counsel. I view the world through the lens of having been followed by a white clerk as a child while shopping in a five and dime. I'm a retired police executive and own UN50, which gives guidance on surviving interactions with police.
I'm Harmony Chavis, and I view the world through the lens of one of the most misunderstood and diverse generations in our nation's history. I'm a social worker and a believer of radical kindness and love as modalities of healing.
My name is Andrew Council. I view the world through the lens of a generational camera phone. I wake up as a black male and go to bed as a black male. I am surviving this never-ending court case we commonly call life in the best way I know how.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to UN50 from the Bull City. For those of you that may not know, we are recording out of Durham, North Carolina, the Bull City. And UN50, thank you for those that are frequent listeners and those of you that may be new that may not know what UN50. It's a business that I started back in 2015. And what I do is I go around and help people, teach people, have presentations and workshop on how to safely interact with law enforcement. It is one of those presentations where I'm not really concerned about you liking the popo. It's about you just getting home. It's about everybody getting home to include law enforcement. So we've been doing that for several years. And so what we are doing tonight is we have a guest, Mr. Tyrone Baker, that we met at a workshop about 2 months now, I guess, here in Durham. And he was very supportive. He even did a little video for us so that I could push out there. So that was really cool of him to do that. And then my co-host, for those of you that know, Andrew's my nephew, and he's my co-host. My other co-host, Harmony Chavis, was not able to join us tonight. So first of all, Andrew, how things going with you?
Going well. Adulting. I think I've been talking about adulting for a while, but it's okay because I feel like I'm not gonna get used to it till I turn like 57, so it's fine.
and when he says adulting, it means he just graduated from college earlier this year. Now he has his own apartment all by his lonesome, and trying not to be a stalking kind of auntie. So I'm trying to figure if I can go visit, but I guess we'll work that out. So
okay, you can stalk me as much as you want.
Sure, you say that now, but I'm sure. So we have Mr. Tyrone Baker. Thank you, Tyrone, for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, Tyrone and I met with Abby, who's our social media guru, at a presentation. Like I said, he was very supportive, and it's always nice to know that he supported the work that I'm doing. And when he and I talked, I was just intrigued about his lived experience and his willingness to share that and the work that he's doing. With that, I'm gonna let him kind of go into that. He sent me his bio, and we'll have it up on there. But Tyrone, I kind of want you to talk about what you do. I think one of the things, you step up, you're on the board of directors, so tell me about that. And then I also want you to tell me about the North Carolina Center in Actual Innocence that you're also working with. So just tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of get into the nitty gritty.
Okay. Well, for starters, as was alluded to earlier, I am justice involved. I did 14 years in prison. I got locked up at the age of 19. I was released at the age of 33. I actually was released in August of 2020, last year. Mm-hmm. While I was incarcerated, I, of course, made a commitment to educate myself and, becoming the best version of myself I could become. So I took countless classes. I read at least 630 nonfiction books. I taught. I was a I was a tutor. I was a food service. I was teacher's assistant for the food service technology class for a couple of years. I was a business lecturer. I was busy. Let's put it like that. I managed to actually delve into writing probably about 6 or 7 years into my bid. I wrote a few articles that got published in academic journals, both here in the United States and in Canada. I actually linked up with a few professors with whom I co-author articles with, and that kind of led to me authoring my first book, which is called A Convict's Perspective, Critiquing Penology and Inmate Rehabilitation. It's a pseudo-academic text that's about prison and really the study of prisons and the ways in which prisons can be a little bit more contributive to society instead of, their current practice, which is not so much. From there, the book kind of led to so many more opportunities that I've been lucky enough to take advantage of. I received a sentence reduction. I wasn't technically supposed to be released until 2029. I managed to get out early. There were some very solid connections that I made to a bunch of very, very solid people who believed in me. So that, of course, led to a sentence reduction. Since I've been out, like was alluded to earlier, I joined the board of Step Up Durham, which is an organization. They help individuals who are disenfranchised or who are just as involved. They help them with job placement, employment training, things of that nature. I'm a member of Bro Capital, which is a Black male-centric financial services firm. I actually work now. My full-time job is at the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence. We basically help guys who have been wrongfully convicted, and we help them fight their charges. We help guys get exonerated for the most part. It's a small law firm that's based here in Durham. It's been around for about 20 years. I have done speaking engagements with the University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg. It's actually a litany of organizations that I've worked with. I've been busy. Just put it like that. I've definitely been busy.
Man, I mean, I'm sitting here in awe. I mean, that's awesome. You doing a lot. You've written a book. I want to hear a little bit more about that. And you were open to me. Oh, I also wanted for Durham. I also want to give. So you graduated from Riverside High School.
Yeah, Riverside, 2005 Pirates.
Riverside, yeah. And I hope you're okay with some of the, because I really want to. Because, like I said, I'm going to be talking to you offline, but you said you've done a lot of reading. You did a lot of this in prison, right? And you went in when you were 19.
Yes, I was 19.
Kind of, and tell me what all this stuff you read, you applied yourself when you got in, when you were in, right? What happened to were you not applying yourself previously before you went in before this?
Oh no,
no, I mean, I'm not
it's kind of no, it's not. I'm an open book, so whatever, so prior to prison, I actually was raised in a solidly middle class family, both parents in the household. I grew up down the street from Northern High School, pretty much in between Northern and Riverside High School off of the Ladder Road. It was split level home, manicure lawn.
There you go.
So I played sports. I wasn't the typical, I guess, convict story. So I actually basically got into a situation with an individual, and I wasn't in the right frame of mind at the time. I had went through a breakup that I took way too hard, and so on the heels of that breakup, I managed to get into a confrontation with an individual, and I had this, F the world mentality at the time, because I just wasn't thinking clearly. And, this individual introduced guns into our beef, and I responded accordingly. And basically, me and a friend of mine shot an individual's vehicle up, and a friend of mine, who's my co-defendant, hit the individual in the head. I shot out the individual's taillight, and the individual died as a result of the injury. So my co-defendant was given a life sentence, and I was sentenced to 22 years and 7 months in prison. And what I didn't know was the victim in my case, who was a Caucasian gentleman, he had family members who were court officials, and that kind of didn't work in my favor. I knew none of this at the time, So
right.
When it was time to be sentenced, I guess they made an example out of me and my co-defendant. So
right.
That was. I basically strayed from the path on which I was raised, and it led to me getting incarcerated. I applied myself very much so throughout most of my adolescence, throughout most of my teen years. This was one particular incident that, I had a very bad few months right there that changed my life forever. So that's just how it happened. I mean, since then, I've definitely been dedicated to trying to alleviate some of the misery I've caused. So
wow. So when with this journey that you're on now, because you're working at, like you said, you're board of directors, Step Up, you're doing this work for the North Carolina Center for Actual Innocence. Kind of tell me, what's your message? What I'm saying? What is, when there's all this stuff out here now talking about, we need to take care of social issues, education, minimum wage, blah, blah, blah. The stuff, right? That doesn't belong in law enforcement's lap, mental health, substance abuse. But so what is it that when you're out here delivering your message, like you said, so what is your message to kind of say, I get that, but what do you feel like you can say that would trigger, but okay, maybe I don't need to do that, or I don't need to, how do you help somebody if that might be the next step, might be they get ready to go do something that's not going to end well? How do you help a person based on your lived experience? What's your words of wisdom?
One thing, there are actually two sides of two ways to answer that question. On a macro level, I am a big fan of economic empowerment. I do believe that is one of the things where that's kind of like my culture's, my generation's civil rights movement in a sense. That's just how I feel. I do think that economic empowerment, not just accumulating money, but accumulating the influence that comes along with being economically strong as a people, can help, I guess, get rid of some of this misery that we face as a community, as a culture, so I do practice or I guess preach, the message of economic self-sufficiency, accumulating wealth, acquiring income producing assets. I do think that a lot of the problems that we face as a culture, as a community, come from poverty, so I think that the best way to combat, criminality is by going at the source. Oftentimes it is poverty and the things that come along with it. So on a macro level, it's economic empowerment is my primary message. On an individual level, if I'm speaking to some young guy that's on the verge of, making some mistakes, I have a unique story and a unique ability to use my story to really reach them. I can definitely let them know, like, bro, not only can I speak your language, little homie, I did 14 years. This ain't no, motivational speaker that's coming at you. I'm letting you know, like, it's a lot of things that we suffer from due to a lack of knowledge. And one thing these little young dudes don't know is that, that life of the streets, that's something it's a trap. It's something that has been used against our people for an extremely long time. On the heels of slavery, the criminal justice system was used to, I guess, sidestep the Emancipation Proclamation. And people have seen 13th, Ava DuVernay. Everybody know the 13th Amendment has a loophole baked into it where slavery is abolished, except if you commit a crime. So everybody, that's not a hidden fact, and ever since the end of the Civil War, people who have never had our best interests in mind have used that to keep us in our place as a people, and so I think that falling into the trap of viewing criminality as something that's attractive, as something that's worthy of pursuing, is basically playing right into the hands of people who have despised us since we've been over here. So I think that on a micro level, I think the most effective weapon that I've used, like as a counselor, I was a counselor for a while when I was incarcerated. The most effective weapon that I've used, this isn't a popular position to have, but it's been effective, is to paint it as if it's like a kind of like a us versus them being everybody who historically has not liked us and has shown so with their actions, So I think that having a common enemy and then showing these young guys, like, look, this is how we can combat these forces that are against us, X, Y, and Z. I bet you ain't know this. I bet you ain't know that. Like, and dropping stuff, like, it's been effective. I've managed to talk a few guys off the ledge, so to speak, and I've managed to encourage a few guys to pursue I guess legitimate or legal economic empowerment and put drug dealing aside and things of that nature. So it's been effective in my experience on a micro level. But overall, I think economic empowerment is like the third leg of our, I guess, liberation triangle. Both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, both of them before their deaths, they talked about the need for Black people to be economic powerhouses. They talked about the need for us to be socially influential, for us to be politically involved, and for us to be economically advanced. Of course, both of them were assassinated before their economically advanced message could be disseminated to the masses. But I do think that right now this is our time to move, and economic empowerment is a way to help guys, get on their feet and stop living lives that are beneath us.
Wow. I'm excited already just listening to you. I'm like, what? I mean, you talking my language, my man. Andrew, before I get, because I got something to say, but go ahead, Andrew. You got something?
I guess I have a question about like being a Black male in society, just in general. I hear a lot about people saying, the second you're born into this world, you're already at a setback, just because of the color of the skin and also your gender, and then those combined, giving us like the anti-privilege of what other people have in society. So I guess like taking that, I guess, look at your life, what would you say? I I want to take a switch. Well, how would you say that being a Black male has benefited you in regard to your experiences and also things you're able to teach others?
Well, for one, I have this sense of cultural pride that kind of like motivates me to, I guess, help others, you know. And I think that that sense of cultural pride comes from knowing that our people have had light skinned foot on our necks for so long, you know what I mean? So me being a Black man in society, I do think that prior to prison, one of the biggest advantages, I hate to say this, now, this is, again, might not be the most politically correct answer, but one of my biggest advantages from being a Black man prior to prison was the fact that people had such low expectations. And by people, I mean people in positions of power who are not used to seeing people who look like me, you know, able to speak on a level that is above or at their level, you know. So I think that low expectations were something that I was saddled with. And because I was willing to work hard and to demonstrate that I'm, you know, capable of performing on the highest levels in any category, I was able to exceed those expectations, which kind of opened up a lot of doors for me, you know. And it's unfortunate because those low expectations are rooted in racism, you know what I mean? But I figure, you know, the best way to kind of like combat it is to use it to my advantage. You know, there have been times in school where going to school, just me being who I was, a teacher or a substitute teacher, whoever expected me to be the class clown or expected me to be the guy who acted out. But, you know, when I was the guy who was kind of like answering all of her questions, when I was the guy who was making all these 100s on these tests in school, you know, it was a shock to them, you know, and me surprising them in that way, it gave me a little bit of freedom to do things that I enjoy, you know, which I use that freedom in a way that I probably shouldn't have used it. You know, sometimes it was okay for me to be, you know, it was okay for me to be a little late to class. It was okay for me to, you know, sometimes not even show up to class, because when I did show up, I would help tutor some of the other kids in the class. And I kind of used that. I abused that freedom, but I do think had I used that freedom in a way that was a little bit more conducive to my growth, that I probably would have been much better off, you know. So the advantages of being a Black man. Hey, hold on. Let me rewind too. First of all, I mean, being a Black man in America, like, bro, we were it's at, like, for real. You know what I mean? We were it's at. We are a people that we are a gender and a people who, hey, hands down, arguably, debatably, are probably the most attractive men on the planet, probably the most capable men on the planet, probably some of the most resilient men on the planet. So just those innate traits are giving me a natural advantage. You know, it's other societal forces that have come against us to try to keep us, you know, from tapping into that potential. But we do have that potential. So that's something that comes from being a Black man. But the low expectations and my ability to exceed those expectations are probably something that I can point to answer your question.
That's good. Thank you.
Woo! That's, you know, I'm really like power to the people. So now, you know what, and just to go back what you were talking about, you know, you were making the A's, making the hundreds and stuff, and you took advantage of that. That's interesting. I don't that when you say that, it makes sense that, but to have you actually say, I because of what I knew I was doing well, and because of that, I did X because of that, because I could get away with it. I don't think I've ever heard anybody actually say, but when I look back at some of the people that I know in school or have met, oh, I was like, that's what they were doing, you know, because I wasn't that person, you know, because I wasn't making A's and hundreds, and I had to stay in class. But so when you see another person, or if you're around youth that does that, do you give them that same message that, you know, look, man, you're smart, you know, so use that, I guess that wealth, for lack of a better word, in a productive manner. And you're saying you wish you had done that.
Yeah, I definitely wish I would have. You know, I managed to garner a lot of influence amongst my peers prior to prison, and I just didn't use that influence constructively. I could have been sitting some of my homeboys down on the basketball team, teaching them how to start businesses, you know, teaching them how to, you know, get into real estate. But instead, you know, I was just that little high school kid that wanted to smoke weed and play basketball, you know. So it definitely, I could have used it differently. You know, I wish I would have used it differently, but you know.
Wow. And also wanted you're obviously talking about how the slavery and you know, just the poverty of it all it's hard to break that, you know, get through that. You know, just, I mean, being in law enforcement, not all the time, but I see that up close and personal. You know what I'm saying? It's not my lived experience. I mean, I've had to do what I had to do to get where I needed to get. But I also recognize that some people, it's harder for some to be able to break that, but they're working toward doing that. And as a culture, we have a tendency, at least in my opinion, that we also have a tendency to forget some of us, and that we need to figure out how to reach back and go, I get that this mother who's working these 4 or 5 jobs, it can't be home with the Black male who is now probably out on the corner doing something and not understanding what that looks like for her, and then figuring out how, as a community, not a community of social workers, but just a community of other Black folks, to able to help her do what she needs to do. Does that make sense? I mean, just how do we collectively as Black folks, we got to go, we need to reach back. Yeah, I'm out. I mean, it's like once we get out, I'm out, and we don't figure out how to reach back. And you ain't got to get but one. All you got to do is just pick one. And so, how do you feel about that? I mean, yeah.
Now, I think that I guess to answer your question, when it comes to us, I guess uniting as a community to help steer some of these young guys, young people in the right direction, giving back is key. It's hard for people to be what they can't see. I would love for guys to look at me and see an example of post-prison success. So guys who are incarcerated can see this example of post-prison success and be like, okay, I see what's possible. Like I would love, I think that is giving back. I'm glad you brought it up, because that's an important part of the process of the process of combating oppression and liberating our people, intellectually and otherwise. So the reason, as a matter of fact, you and I met at Straight Talk Support Group. I did a fundraiser with Straight Talk Support Group, which is a transition house for guys who are just getting out of prison. I helped them raise several $1,000s on a virtual fundraiser, because I know that they needed resources to kind of help them provide the services they provide. So dudes who make it, so to speak, not only is it important that they give back, but it's also important that they maintain that relatability that they probably had before they made it, so to speak. So I can speak to a young guy, and I can relate to a young guy who is coming home from prison, and I can let them know not only about resources that are available to them, but I can say, look, bro, look what I did, and you can do the same thing. You know what I mean? So I do. And on top of that, one of the things that is extremely important is specifics. I've met up with a lot of people in the nonprofit sector here in Durham who are aiming and seeking to do great things. But when it comes to actually talking to those who need help, the direct service providers, there is a lack of specific, tangible, actionable items that are presented to these young dudes that they actually feel like they can pursue. So I used to tell guys, for example, we used to talk about cleaning up the projects, and I used to tell them how the local elementary schools and middle schools receive their funding based on the property values of the communities from which the students come from. You know what I mean? So I felt like that was a powerful message. Y'all clean up your hoods, your schools get more funding, your kids get better resources, blah, blah, blah. But then I started realizing, like, hold on, this message ain't resonating like it's supposed to. So I dug a little deeper. I said, look, bro, so I'm gonna teach you how to start a business, and I'm gonna teach you why you should start a business. But for starters, I'm gonna let you know that, for example, you can start your business, start your LLC, for example, and put your car in your LLC's name. So now when the police get behind you and run your tags, they won't see your name. They'll see your company's name, like as far as registration and stuff like that goes. So little messages like that, they started to pick up on it, like, I didn't know that, So I started hitting them with little, very actionable, very specific things like that. And that's something I found was effective. And that's something I think that a lot of people in the activist community or a lot of direct service providers kind of overlook when it comes to, in particular, young Black men who are on the verge of delving into criminality. So reaching back is important. So is having a message that's tailored to your audience, having a message and being someone who is relatable. So those three things together, I think, are one of the vital components of helping the youth.
So because of your lived experience and the moment that happened at the age of 19, do you think you would be the person that you are now? Or do you think because of that moment, it has created you? I mean, because 600 plus books, that's a lot of reading. I mean, so, I mean, and it's clear that, it's just, you're awesome. I love it. I love it.
Appreciate it.
So, yeah, no. I mean, seriously, Anyway, so based on that moment, if that moment had not occurred, who do you think you might have been? And because that moment did occur, And you know how it's created this you it has it I mean sometimes I mean I've had some stuff happen to me that's been pretty public, right? And so it moved, it kind of pushed me out. I mean, I had to grow in a different direction that I didn't think I was going to ever have to grow in. It made me have to grow in a particular direction because it was a public scandal. So I mean, that's hard to, you know, not anything like you, but you know, getting your personal and professional integrity blasted all over the media, that's, you know, you want to crawl up in a hole somewhere. So what has, if that moment had not occurred, do you think you would, is this your thing, or that all of that, you know, is this where, you know, this is the space you're supposed to be in? Was the universe saying, you know, this is where, you know, would you have arrived at this moment without that moment? I guess.
Honestly, BJ, I don't think I would have. And
Okay.
a primary reason is because I grew up relatively sheltered. You know, of course I had like homeboys and stuff that, you know, lived in the projects, family members, you know, sold drugs and things of that nature. But I was lucky enough to grow up in a household where that wasn't my necessary reality. It were
Yeah.
I could dibble and dabble in it when I want to. You know what I mean? I could go in, I can go out and hang out with the dudes at the house parties. You know what I mean? I can go out and go to the liquor house and stuff. I could kick it in Bradtown and places like that. And then, but I knew I could go home and put all that stuff aside and feel safe, you know. So that wasn't, so I knew I could dibble and dabble in it, but because I could dibble and dabble in it, I never really understood the seriousness. I never understood the broad societal forces that are coming
Okay.
against people who are living in these impoverished communities, these predominantly chocolate impoverished communities.
Yes.
So I don't think I would have gotten as deep of an understanding of the forces that we are up against had I not went through this, because mass incarceration, the just mass criminalization, those were things that just weren't on my radar. You know, I got accepted to a couple universities right before I got locked up. So my intention was to go, and I wanted to major in mechanical engineering. So I would have
Wow.
went that direction. And I seriously doubt I would have encountered enough stimuli to provoke this response. I don't think I would have encountered enough things. You know, I don't think I would have encountered that, because I would have continued to live a sheltered life detached from the people that I claimed to have identified with back then, you know? So I don't think I would have arrived at this point. Now, of course, nobody knows for sure what would have
Yeah.
or could have happened. You know, who's
Yeah.
to say, you know, I wouldn't have been exposed to it in many other ways. There are plenty of people out here who are doing great things, who are powerhouses, who did not go the route that I went. You know, I mean, there were plenty of people who lived an extremely, you know, green vanilla life who are solid activists now. You
I
know?
love it.
And
Green
so
vanilla. What is
yeah,
green vanilla?
green and vanilla. You know, what I mean, there are plenty of people
That
just
that's now that
nothing
is
in
milk.
it.
Look, that is milk toast in another whole language. I know if I heard of green vanilla. That yeah,
Yeah.
you ain't been exposed to crap if you live in a
Yeah,
green vanilla life. Man,
yeah, both together. So,
I know,
like I
right?
said, I don't know. Like I said, I think there are some solid people, and I can name a few who don't have dark past. They have great past, great
Right.
upbringings. You know, college educated, great in school, wonderful social circles, but they are very much woke and very much active on, you know, the anti-mass incarceration scene. You know,
Right.
so
Right.
I don't know. I might have went that way. Who knows? You know, or I might have went to Wall Street. I don't know. You know, so I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
think that I'm glad that to be honest, I don't know what forces led me in this direction, but I'm glad that I was able to use my time inside to, like I said earlier, become the best version of myself. You know, so that is something that I definitely don't regret. Of course, I regret the things that landed me in prison, and I
Yes.
definitely am not advocating for prison. I hate prison. I despise it. It is contemporary slavery in many ways. It is residue of the slavery that our ancestors endured. It's just a contemporary version. It is horrible, and it's ran by people who dislike me and dislike people who look like me and probably would have disliked my ancestors. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
prison is not the place for societal advancement. It's not the place to grow. I became the best version of myself, not because I went to prison, but despite going to prison. You know, so but I'm glad that I was able to use that time and try to make it so that when I came home, I could hit the ground running.
Wow. I mean, I appreciate that too. I think it's really because we never know what the universe is going to toss our way. And
Exactly.
it really just, what do you make out of that, whatever it tosses your way? And that kind of, I guess, determines the next step. You know, and you made the decision to get the best of you in this moment. And here you are, you know, I mean, you're preaching, man. I mean, I'm loving this. This This is powerful. I think. Tell me a little bit more about your book. Because we're gonna, we'll definitely
Okay.
gonna put a link out on when we post the podcast so people can look at it. But kind of, I mean, I don't want, like I said, I don't want to give away this all the story, but kind of tell me what it was that drove you to writing this book, and what
Okay.
kind of, cursory of what's the message you're trying to send.
Okay, so my book is called A Convict's Perspective, Critiquing Penology and Inmate Rehabilitation. So what led me to it was, as I said before, I was an avid reader. So I started reading textbooks about criminology and penology, which is the study of prisons. So I wanted to see what the so-called experts had to say about the things that I was living through, the environment that I was living in. So in reading some of the work of some of the most prominent criminologists in the country, I started noticing little holes in their arguments. I started noticing like, okay, you are very impressive on paper, and you have a lot of respect in those ivory towers, but some of your theories and arguments aren't exactly applicable to my lived experience. So I kind of felt like, yeah. So I was thinking like, here are a lot of people who have never lived in prison, and for the most part have only looked at prison from a bird's eye view or from a detached vantage point.
Right.
So I was like, you know what, I'm in here and I'm letting you know that my lived experiences are in direct contradiction to your theories, your, quote unquote arguments. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start writing the truth. I'm gonna start writing some literature that can be taken seriously, but also reveals the truth as I see it on the inside. I looked at it like, okay, here are people who may have went to school for a decade, but they're writing about an environment that I lived in for a decade. There isn't a single academic outside of the field of convict criminology who has lived in prison as long as I do, let alone at all, really. So I'm like, okay, so I would think that I'm just as much of an expert as any penologist or any criminologist. They don't know what is. I was housed at 10 different prisons, including the county jail, 9 different prisons in the county jail throughout my entire bid.
Wow.
So there is no administrator, there is no prison staff member working in the state right now who has worked at that many prisons, let alone lived there. And I lived there for a couple years at each one of them. So I got to see so many different administrations, so many different, not only fellow prisoners, but so many different staff members, so many different ways of running prisons, so many different education programs, I saw prisons that didn't have any education programs. Like I saw all of this, academics don't see it from the vantage point that I see it. So I was like, you know what? I'm finna write this. I'm finna let y'all know what it is for real. And I'm gonna do so in a way that lets you know that I'm informed. I know what y'all know, but I also know stuff y'all don't. So I definitely used some of the work of prominent criminologists now, like Joan Petersilia and individuals who have made a name for themselves. Hans Todt. These criminologists have made a name for themselves in the worlds of criminology, and I know their theories. I knew their theories in and out, but I also knew where they fell short. So after writing, like I said, I got a few articles published in some academic journals, and I got the attention of a couple really progressive and open-minded academics like Dr. Kimberly Cook at UNC Wilmington and Dr. Renee Lamphere at UNC Pembroke, Dr. Sharice Carson at UNC Charlotte. So they started kind of paying attention to Dr. Sandra Westervelt at UNC Greensboro. They kind of seemed interested in what I had to say. So I was like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna give you a little bit more, and eventually, so I'm on the yard one day and I'm doing laps with my homeboy who happened to write the foreword in my book. And he's like, hey Ty, how about, and called me TY in prison. He was like, hey TY, how about you take all your essays that you've been writing and just blend them all together into the form of a book, because they all talk about prison. They're all, critical of mainstream criminology. They're all, based on empirical information, real lived information. So why not blend it all together into a book? I was like, all right, I'll do it if you write the foreword. He was like, bet. So I took all my writings, blended them together in the form of a book, made sure everything flowed seamlessly. And from there, I went the self-publishing route, which this is something that I don't think people who have one thing that I don't think people recognize about writing the type of book that I wrote, which I'm very critical of North Carolina's prison system in particular in my book, is that I'm writing this in an environment where I don't have any control. There were a couple times where my manuscripts just happened to get destroyed in routine
Oh,
locker searches. And,
oh
there
wow.
were a couple times where, officers are like, just all up in my business. Like, look, what you doing? I had to hide like I'm Anne Frank during
Oh
World War II or
God.
something. I mean, having to hide my literature.
Oh
So,
wow.
nobody, So I'm like, I had to make sure I had to write in secret sometimes. There were times where I was sitting in the cell, sitting by the window because I happen to have one of the little prison lights outside my window. So I'm sitting because they done cut the lights off. So I'm sitting by the window writing, my eyes hurting and stuff because I know. I had to kind of like write certain parts in secret because I felt like doing all this work. I felt like at any given moment, the staff members might come in and see what I'm trying to do
Oh
and
wow.
get rid of all my
Wow.
work. So I kind of had doing self-publishing a book outside of prison is hard. So from within it was like I was like, oh man. So I did my own marketing. Me and my mom is that's my queen. So she helped me in ways that I can't even explain. So what I would do is after my book was published, I asked my mom, I said, Mom, can you give me a list of the most prominent criminologists and penologists here in North Carolina? So she was like, cool. And of course, all of them worked at all the universities across the state. So I
Right.
had got their mailing addresses too. So I was like, okay, Mom, so this is what we're going to do. I said, Mom, we're going to get 30 copies of my book. And I'm going to pick the 30, most influential criminologists here in the state. And she was like, cool. So I was like, how about this? We're going to go in each criminologist. We're going to find something that they have written, like an article they have gotten published, a chapter they've written in the book or whatever. And I want you to send it to me. So my mama was like, cool. So my mama would send it to me. I would go through and I would say, okay, I agree with this. This is bullshit, but I agree with this. I would go through and I would dissect it and I would write basically like a little report on this piece of literature from this other academic. So I would send them that report that I wrote criticizing their work or
Oh,
compliment their work.
all
And I
right.
would send them a copy of my book and I would send them a letter like, hey, this is something that I wrote about the piece you wrote. Here's a copy of my book. I just wanted to make myself known to you, introduce myself to you. And that got their attention, So
Wow.
I just kept doing that until, I started gaining some traction. So my book got mentioned in a few, it became a part of the curriculum at a couple universities. It's in several university libraries and from that,
Oh wow.
that's how I did my marketing, so.
Oh man. That's awesome. Hey, Andrew, did you know the professor he mentioned from because Andrew just recently graduated from UNCG?
I heard, yes. I knew the
Okay.
name. I knew the name.
Oh, Sandra Westervelt. She's actually super cool, man. She's dope. She's cool.
Wow. So, I mean, everything that you've been through, Tyrone, this is awesome stuff. What are you most thankful for?
My family. My family rolled with me from day one. I had people who my immediate family. There were a lot of people who I had distant family members and close friends who cut me off. And when I got locked up, it was like, they were ghosts. They basically I was written off, but my mom, my dad, they stayed right there. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. It was my mom, my dad that was sending me money while I was locked up. And because I had money, I didn't have to gamble. I didn't have to hustle. I didn't have to sell drugs or extort people or things like that to make sure my stomach won't growl when I went to sleep at night. I didn't have to do that because they kept me with money. So because I didn't have to do those things, I could focus solely on reading and studying and educating myself. So they took care of the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs so I could climb to the top to self-actualization, So my family, I'm super grateful for them just riding with me because I can't, I can't do anything. I couldn't have done anything without them being in my corner. I wouldn't be free right now if they wouldn't have reached out to Butch Williams and so I wouldn't be free. It's them, so I actually a part of my journey, a part of my quest is to make sure that I live a life that's worthy of the investment that they've made into me. I got to make sure that I pay homage to those that came before me and those that supported me so that I could grow and thrive. And I got to make sure I'm becoming that type of dude that can pay it forward. So my family, I'm most grateful for them, hands down.
Wow, man. So, that makes sense clearly. And, my little stuff that I went through, I tell you, man, you find out who your friends are. I used to tell people after my little scandal, I was like, they were like, how'd you do? I said, well, my Christmas card list just got a little shorter.
Yeah, it got a little shorter. You're right about that. You're right about that.
Stamps. But, when you say that, though, one of the things that I remember seeing as a police officer, and I don't remember the woman or anything like that. And when you talk about family, you just never know. I mean, your family, no matter what, is always going to be there. And I went to this call, and this lady, this daughter, they were having an argument. It was near the intersection of Austin Avenue and I don't know, right across from Central's campus. Anyway, she was
Okay.
an argument, and the daughter ran out. And the last thing she said to her mother, and I was like, she said, "I hope you die." And I've seen some stuff, right? And that particular moment has just stuck with me because I've often wondered, does she even know what she just said to her mother? You know what I'm saying? And I know you say stuff in heated moments, but you saying that, you want to give back. They supported you, and you want to make sure that they know that you appreciate it, and obviously you do. When people just don't realize, you have these moments, and it's family. It's family that's going to take care of you. And I don't know,
Exactly.
when you say that, I mean, like I said, that when people talk about family, that moment and that for me just resonated because you that's all you got. Because everybody else is going to be like, bye.
Yeah.
And
that's unfortunate, and seeing in a situation like that young lady, see, when I hear that, see, what comes to mind is I'm thinking about, first of all, the area that you're talking about is predominantly Black, over off Austin Avenue, across from Central. So I'm assuming you're talking about like around Matduga, around that area.
Yeah.
So what I hear is a young woman and her mother who are members of a race of people who have been traumatized. Right. We are dealing with a lot of psychological trauma, a lot of socio-emotional pain that a lot of times we don't know how to deal with, but it's very chronic and very acute. So a lot of times that pain comes out in ways that we wouldn't want it to come out. I see somebody struggling, not knowing how to deal with the emotions that she's dealing with. You know what I mean? Dealing with situations that aren't entirely self-induced. A lot of her condition isn't her fault, and she doesn't understand it. That's probably frustrating, and actually going back to justice involved situations and people, a lot of individuals end up prison because they're trying to seek some type of relief from that chronic pain that they feel, or the sense of, I guess, historical disadvantage that we've been subjected to, and the things that causes, so you got a lot of guys in prison right now because of their egos being so fragile. They felt the need to assert their dominance or assert their manhood because they live in a country that won't allow them to do it in the ways that it allows, mainstream white America to do it. So it's like, okay, well, I feel like I can't go get a job. I feel like I can't excel. I feel like I can't realize a life that has some sophistication to it by the traditional means. Well, I'm gonna go and do it my way. I'm gonna go do it how I know how to do it, and it leads to incarceration. I see a lot of people turning to drugs because they got this pain that they dealing with, and they just want the pain to stop. So they make impulsive decisions. They put a needle in their arm. They sniff powder. They do whatever they do to alleviate that pain that they feeling with, and eventually that becomes a habit or an addiction, and that leads to incarceration many times, if not death or whatever, or physical dissolution or whatever. So I see that a lot of this historical trauma that we've been dealt that we've been subjected to as a people is causing a lot of issues right now that I think that we really need to address on a broad level and as individuals. So and UN50 is a great organization because a lot of times when people are having these moments where they are acting out or resorting to, I guess, coping mechanisms that may not be the most healthy, a lot of times they encounter law enforcement during these times. I'm pretty sure you as a law enforcement officer have encountered people who probably used to have great lives, but then dove into drugs and, got strung out or are lashing out because somebody disrespected them, and now they feel like they got to make their name right. And, I'm pretty sure you've encountered that, so people in law enforcement encounter a lot of situations that, stem from the historical traumas we've been dealing with. And I think that teaching people not only what their rights are, but how to make it through those situations and still maintain a sense of dignity and self-respect. And, and I think that that's an important service that y'all are providing. It's really difficult to have a successful, quote unquote, successful interaction with law enforcement, knowing that law enforcement for so long wasn't an organization that was about the upliftment of Black people. What I mean? I'm talking about not only in recent history, from the crack epidemic all the way back to the slave patrols, So it's
Yeah.
not like we have had an outstanding relationship with law enforcement. You look at pictures and a lot of those old photos of us being hung from trees is somebody with a
Yeah.
badge in the audience, you know? So it's not
Yeah.
like, you know, an amazing organization for or to Black people historically, you know? So that is always in people's minds, especially people who look like me when we encounter law enforcement. So
Yeah.
teaching us what our rights are and what our rights aren't is extremely important so that we can still get through these encounters and be like, okay, I can deal with my trauma. I can deal with my issues in a way that's healthy. I can come out of this interaction with some integrity and some self-respect. You know, I don't have to be belittled. I don't have to be taken advantage of, but I also don't have to be like all types of negative things that, you know, I
Yeah.
shouldn't be. You know, so I mean, I think that that's an important service y'all are providing because y'all stepping in that gap right there to help people deal with their traumas. And I don't think a lot of law enforcement officers realize that.
Yeah, you know what, and I appreciate that because I thank you for that. God, I mean that means a lot coming from you because that really is what I'm trying to do. I mean, you know, take off the uniform. I'm Black, gonna be Black. You know, that's gonna be the first thing. You know what I'm saying? And I get that. And so for me, trying to figure out how to get Black bodies to get through that interaction, you know, and then officers need to understand. You know, you got to understand what people are going through. I mean, that's a crisis moment and people are not just sometimes rational. So, you know, slow your roll sometime, Popo, slow your roll. So, you know, and I appreciate you talking about the trauma because that was the other piece of that is when I step into a space and I'm going to call or something like that, just what you just said, I realize that there's a lot of trauma. I mean, it's generational trauma, you know, so I go to a house, Tyrone, and in some instances, I've arrested everybody in the house, you know, from grandpa all the way down, you know, you know, I'm not trying to be funny, but I mean, that's a reality and people don't understand that. So, you know, and then unfortunately, I'm looking at a 6-year-old walking around, you know, trying to be a kid. And I also in the back of my head is law enforcement, also knowing if nothing in this generational trauma with these individuals, adults don't change, this 6-year-old is going to become part of this. And, you know, so the thing for me is how it, I mean, obviously the work that I do, but also the other piece of that is, come on, community, because this ain't this, you know, 6 minutes because I got to go to the next call. So I can't help this generational trauma.
Yeah.
So what is it that we need to tell the community in order to break this cycle? You know, so they don't need the popo coming in the house talking about my boo messing around with somebody. I don't need to know that as a police officer. That's, you know, y'all need to work that out, but you got me in here. So what is it that your message would be, or how would you kind of start this dialogue with the community? Say this generational trauma, police are in here, but the popo ain't gonna fix this. Been going on since grandpa and everybody, you know, so, and, you know, you just touched on how, what would be your, like, okay, how do we fix that generational stuff?
Well, I think the message would be well for starters, in my personal life, I feel like I'm capable. I feel like I can protect myself, protect my family. I feel like I'm good when it comes to resolving conflicts and resolving problems. So in my mind, I don't feel like there's a need to call the police if I have a problem and that problem can't be solved by something that's on the police's belt. Then I don't need to call the police. You feel me?
Right,
So that's because I'm not going to call them for an issue that they can't solve. You know what I mean? A lot of people call the police just because it's just like, hey, I ain't got nothing else. I ain't got nobody else to call. Right. And you calling the police for a social issue. You know what I mean? Or issue. I'm like, I'm not finna, they ain't how. So, but to answer your question though, I do think that the biggest message that, or the message that I've managed to get out to a few guys that I found resonated the most was viewing law enforcement as a tool. So I used to do a little, I guess you can call it a regular class that I taught through the Moore Science Temple of America when I was at Johnson County Correctional. So one of the things that I kind of demonstrated to guys was I showed them how law enforcement has been used as a tool, but it has been used by people who historically, you know, like I said, didn't have our best interests in mind. So it isn't unheard of. If you go through history, you'll find plenty of examples where people with a certain agenda have infiltrated law enforcement and made law enforcement do things that, you know, they help them fulfill that agenda, you know? So I look at something like a prime example being something like, all right, this is something your listeners probably don't know. So when I was about 20, 24, maybe about 22. I was younger. I was about 22, 21. I was in a maximum security prison, close custody prison, Pasquotank Correctional in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. So I kind of like, this is my first time being exposed to people who were Aryan Nation and active Nazis and, you know, people like that. I had never been exposed to them prior to this. You know, I grew up in Durham, well, around the parts of Durham I grew up.
I know, right?
They're not having that. You feel me? So
yeah.
I got out with some guys, and of course, I don't look like somebody who would be like an easy win. So it's not like they were out to take advantage of me because they didn't know what they was coming against. And also, I'm not trying to take advantage of anybody. So I also managed to sit down with these guys and talk to them. I used to talk to some of the big Aryan dudes, like, so what are y'all beliefs? Like, what's y'all history? Like, why do y'all think what y'all think? Like, where did that come from? So one thing I found was these Aryan dudes, I ain't gonna say their names, but they were older.
Right.
I was 21. They were probably like in their early 50s at the time. So they're about maybe a couple decades, 25 years older than I. So they said that in about the late 70s, in Texas, it started in Texas, the highest ranking Aryan Nation individuals across the entire state basically put out a directive to all of their subordinates. They basically were like, look, stop growing your hair all long, stop getting all these crazy tattoos. Look, go join the military. When you get out of the military, join law enforcement. You know what I mean? That was kind of like a directive that they put out. You know? And of course, this is before I was born. I was born in 86. You know what I mean? But we're talking about, we're talking about kind of like right before the crack epidemic like really took off. There was a directive put out amongst the Aryan Nation to basically become law enforcement officials. So you got Aryan Nation using law enforcement to advance their agenda to protect white America, to protect, their, interest, at the same time, making sure we don't protect ours, you know what I mean? And then crack comes into the picture. And it's like, okay, now they have a reason to take it even further, you know what I mean? And go, and so it's like, so law enforcement has been used as a tool by different groups in the past. I'm like, you know what? We can, of course, not for the purpose of not for evil purposes, but law enforcement still can be used as a tool. I would love to see people, becoming law enforcement officers who are actually committed to making sure that, my family and the people I identify with are safe and protected. Yes. You know what I mean? I would love for them to, the police see my mom and say, hey, Miss Baker, how you doing? You know what I mean? Or I'd love to see, instead, I would love the police to see me instead of, asking me like where I'm going. They say, excuse me, Mr. Baker, I ain't mean to bother you. Go and have a nice day. Like, I would love for them to make sure our community is good and safe and make sure ain't no crazy stuff going on that is directly opposed to our advancement as a people. You know what I mean? And we can actually use law enforcement to make that happen. We just need people who are radical Black leftists and people who are unapologetically like committed to our cultural advancement to start, infiltrating that arena right there and start becoming law enforcement officials to make sure that, like, okay, instead of me going through viewing Lil Rashad in the projects, instead of me viewing him as an enemy combatant, he look like my little cousin. Let me go through and help him out. Like, I want to see that, because when you look at organizations like the mob, like they had no problem infiltrating law enforcement and making sure law enforcement was helping them advance their agenda. You look at like the Italian mob in New York and stuff like that, they had no problem getting the police chiefs and all the badge wearers on their side, making sure that they could get away with God knows what. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's not unheard of to use law enforcement as a tool. It's time for radical Black leftists to jump on that bandwagon and start using law enforcement as a tool that helps our cause, that helps our agenda. And of course, that's an unpopular position to have, but I'm just keeping it real. I'm a radical Black leftist, and that's what we view. That's how we view it. You know what I mean? We can't make progress. I mean, we gotta start making these institutions our own. You know what I mean? I would like to convert this institution from being our enemy to being our asset. You know what I mean? So that's something that I think we should kind of like be talking about.
Wow, that's interesting, because on my last show that I just got through talking about, we actually talked about recruiting, and that it's a good profession, and not everybody Black may, because some Black officers still mess up stuff, right? But it's a good profession, and local community members should join law enforcement. I mean, that you're right. I mean, there's just, instead of seeing, like you said, looking at folks through the lens of, oh, that's a bad person, you're looking at them through the eyes of just being another human being, and just trying to be here and be empathetic. And but that takes the that takes the system that we talked about a little bit, just changing how they recruit, who they look for, what they want in a police officer. So yeah, I don't know whether I'm like you, the extreme leftist radical, but I definitely support the idea of more folks who are about just the community being safer and treating people as human beings, because you're empathetic to that. So yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense, because we actually talked a little bit about military. That may not exactly be the best place to go get people. I mean, not saying that they're not good individuals in the military, but we need to, maybe the person who's doing customer service, serving, pushing you your big McDonald's fries, that might be the person that we need to hire as law enforcement. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, definitely. And I think that'd be more effective. I'm pretty sure that I used to stay in Northern Durham, in the community I grew up with. If I was the police, and I ain't got no military training whatsoever, but if I was the police, I'm pretty sure I could resolve more conflicts amongst people in the community than any outsider could, because I grew up with these individuals. It's like, bro, we went, like, I know y'all, we used to spend a night over your house as kids. Like, bro, what's really going on? I could be a more effective, conflict resolver, because I'm from here, so, and I think that, the other side of that though is, we got to recognize too that, sometimes, people who have great intentions join law enforcement and become a part of the problem. They actually probably go into it thinking that they can do great things and uplift their community, but they, I guess, get in there and sometimes drink the Kool-Aid or hang around individuals or be influenced by individuals that they shouldn't be influenced by, and it leads to them becoming as oppressive as any oppressor. So that is something that, of course, has to be kind of like balanced with, the community members are adorning badges. But it's something that we definitely, it's a conversation that needs to be had, because I think all out war against the police is not an option, and that's not something that is sustainable. That's not something that's going to lead to progress as a culture, as a community. You know what I mean? So it's like, we need to start deploying some heavily strategic and tactical diplomatic moves. You know what I mean? Which is infiltration and making sure that we are steering law enforcement towards actually being servants of our community and protectors of our communities instead of antagonists.
I love it. Wow, that's a good point to kind of close out. Andrew, do you have anything?
Not that I can think of, other than something I was thinking throughout the talk as we were discussing, is about I'm looking a lot, I'm writing an article right now just about the purpose of impact, and like realizing why you were put onto this planet, or what impact you would like to choose to have when you, I guess, figure out why you're here. And I think that listening to you talk, I was able to understand one of the reasons why you're here on this planet. I think that you inspired me from that. Like the time, like the hour that we've been able to speak, I've learned so much and been able to soak so much knowledge from understanding your purpose in your world and the spaces that you enter, and also the privilege that we have to be able to speak to you. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, I appreciate it, bro. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, and I thank you. Because you're right. I mean, I appreciate your being willing to share your lived experience and take in just the fact that you have whatever your universe had a plan for you. Probably, you probably would not have chosen that plan, but obviously,
it chose me.
Yeah, it chose you, and you and you are doing what the planet and the universe has put you here to do. After whatever that was, what the stuff that you went through. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to probably have you back again at some time, maybe next year.
I'm definitely open to it.
I mean, you have been, like I said, when we get ready to sign off, we're gonna chat a few minutes before you actually leave. So, any parting words, Tyrone, that you want to leave with?
Yeah, I do want to, shameless plug time. The North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence. Look, y'all, we are having a fundraiser at Bull City Barbecue October 7th. Come through, get some food. And Bull City Barbecue is going to donate a portion of the profits to the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence, so we can help guys get out of prison who don't deserve to be there, who are innocent of the charges that they've been serving time for. So y'all come out and support us, man. October 7th, Bull City Barbecue.
Bull City Barbecue. Okay, cool. Thank you. That's great. And we're gonna. I probably need a link for that. We can find it my social media guru, we can do that and put that out as a link. So when we post that, we will definitely help you with that. So yeah,
I'll share a link in my book too. I'll share it. It's on Amazon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're gonna put that out there as well too. So thank you, Tyrone, for this really motivating conversation. I feel really good about it. Thank you. This has been good stuff.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. You and 5-0. Thank y'all for having me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Andrew, take it easy. I guess I'm gonna come visit. You know, I ain't gonna bring no food, but I'll come visit.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, folks, for joining us. As usual, those of us that are continuing to support us, thank you so much. And again, thanks to Tyrone Baker for joining us. And as always, stay well, stay safe, peace.